Weapons totally made up for the disappointing nonsense that was Barbarian, and I am very happy about that. Okay, you guys, I saw Weapons yesterday afternoon, Thursday preview day, 2:17 p.m., that was a little different. And then eventually I figured out why it was that. And I'm here to say that I enjoyed the heck out of this movie. I was a little concerned about whether it would stick the landing for me because Barbarian absolutely did not. The last act of Barbarian was so ridiculous that it just took me right out of what had up until that point just had me. I was in it, and then it just lost the plot, jumped the shark, whatever. And it just, I couldn't. That film did not hold up. This film does. So I am definitely much more inclined to check out whatever movies Zach Cregger brings to us in the future. I think he's got a real talent for storytelling, or at least crafting a story for you visually in a way that's very well done. So, Weapons. I didn't watch the trailers, but I heard about them. So I knew the premise going in, that it was about a classroom of students that just disappeared overnight at 2:17 in the morning. All of the children disappeared, except for one. And suspicion immediately fell on the teacher. I'm going to try to make this as spoiler-free as possible because I think that going into this not knowing what in the absolute heck is happening is probably the best way to view this. The film is more than 2 hours long, so it certainly takes its time to construct this story. And I really appreciated that about it. Sometimes horror movies that are pushing the 2-hour mark, it just feels a bit much. But then other times it feels perfect. I think if there had been really anything trimmed off of this, I would have noticed it and not in a good way. In other words, I can't think of anything that should have been cut out of this because everything that they showed was pertinent to understanding the characters and eventually fully understanding what's going on and the role that the different characters played in the overall story. This movie stars Julia Garner and Josh Brolin. Very glad Josh Brolin was in here. I heard he replaced Pedro Pascal because Pascal couldn't do it for scheduling reasons. So I'm satisfied and happy with that switch. Not that I think Pedro would have done a terrible job because, as I've stated before, I think he's a good actor. I am getting a bit weary of him, not just on screen, but off screen with his yappy mouth. That's a whole thing with him. But Josh Brolin does a good job in here. Julia Garner does a good job in here. There's a guy also in here. Oh, gosh, the dude who played Han Solo. He's a good actor. Can't remember his name now off the top of my head and didn't write it down for this review. I'll post it in the video. So the story, it just kind of jumps right into the situation immediately, with narration telling you that one day this classroom of kids vanished. The police couldn't figure out what happened. There was video on some of the family's home cameras, like the Ring cameras or whatever, security cameras, catching the kids just going out of the house and running down the road Naruto style. I kid you not. That's how they run, or that's what it reminded me of. Maybe it's not exactly, but it's funny. And I'm not the only one who noticed that. I've seen other people refer to it that way. And the town is understandably suspicious of the teacher, who is played by Julia Garner, because they think that she had something to do with what happened, or that she influenced the children in some way to do whatever. They think she has the answers. So right away, the premise of everything is set up. The dynamic of the characters around Julia Garner is set up. The mystery is set up. They don't waste time getting you to that point. This is what it is, and this is when the story really starts. I like the structure of this. In some ways, it reminded me a little bit of Barbarian. You know how in Barbarian, the story's going along with the girls at this Airbnb, and there's a guy that's there as well. And it's just like, you just feel this very ominous sort of setup for something. And then all of a sudden, there is this massive gear shift, and we switch to Justin Long. And it's like, what? Eventually you understand why it's showing him and how he ties into the story. The exact same thing happens in this one. It's told in chapters, with each chapter representing a specific character in the story. And at first, you don't understand. And I was starting to wonder how, like, what does this have to do with the main mystery of these kids? Get to the point. And the filmmaker does, because eventually you understand how everything ties together, how all these different characters are involved in the overall story. And when I say involved, I don't necessarily mean that they had something to do with what happened, but all of the characters are somehow integrated in the overall mystery. So I really enjoyed that about the structure. It felt purposeful. It didn't feel gimmicky. And I also liked that at the end of each sort of chapter, there's almost a bit of not almost, there's kind of a bit of like a cliffhanger-y sort of thing. And then it jumps to another person in the story, goes back however long, shows their journey in this story, and then you see how it intersects, connects with what's been going on before. And through this story structure, eventually the mystery is revealed to you. You find out what has happened. And for me, it worked completely. I appreciated how all of this was handled. I appreciated the reveal. The reveal made some sense to me. Even though there are a couple of things that I do have tiny issues with, they feel more like nitpicks, and maybe a second viewing would make it a little more clear to me. But I like the reveal. I like the mystery that is uncovered. I like how it shows you little by little. And it's probably not until the very last chapter with the last character of the story that you get the full picture of what's going on. Kind of like Life of Chuck, you know, how it went backwards, and it wasn't until like Act 1, which was technically the last act of the movie, that you fully understood what was really going on. It's kind of like that. So each chapter adds more context, deepens the mystery a little bit, because the more you see, the more you start to wonder, what is this? What is going on? So I don't know. I really enjoyed that. I also like that the characters, for the most part, they are layered in a good way. They're not really presented as black and white caricatures of whatever. There's only one character in here that doesn't feel as nuanced maybe as all the others, but that's just because this character, it's hard to say without sort of giving away stuff, but this character doesn't have as much, let's say, baggage in their life. So that's why they feel less layered and nuanced as a character. I'll leave it at that. That's not really a complaint. It's just an observation. I felt like the performances across the board were very solid. Julia Garner, Josh Brolin, the kid who plays Alex, really, really liked his performance. I felt he carried that very well. And you don't really pick up on it or notice that so much until you delve deeper and deeper into the story. But I don't have anything negative to say about the acting in general, and specifically about his acting. Even though he's a kid, I thought he did a solid job. There is sort of a cameo appearance in here that harkened back to another movie, which I won't say, because like I said, I'm trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. It kind of gave me a chuckle, but at the same time, I started to get a little bit concerned, but there's nothing to worry about. It was okay. Maybe in the comments, I'll tell you what it is after this video goes up. Unlike Barbarian, which I've already touched on, I feel that Weapons stayed cohesive with regard to the overall narrative. And to me, it delivered a satisfying payoff at the end. I'm kind of feeling that the director, who's also the writer, he was the writer of both Barbarian and this one, I'm feeling like maybe he kind of, I want to say, learned from the missteps of Barbarian, because it really does feel like he cleaned up his act as far as delivering something that is solid from start to middle to end. That's what Barbarian lacked for me, that solid ending. Did not stick the landing. Weapons absolutely did for me. I'm so happy about that. I really think that this might be ending up on my top 10 list for the year because I think I gave it a 4.325 rating or something. I haven't posted those reviews, but that's the star rating in my mind. I also liked the fact that the horror elements or the suspense or whatever, it doesn't overly saturate this movie. Some people might have a problem with the fact that it's not filled with horror stuff or scary imagery. Some people might feel that this film isn't scary at all. It was scary to me in different aspects just because, well, psychologically horrifying because of some of the things you find out. When it's revealed what happened, what's going on, the cause of all this, to me that's pretty scary because you're trying to figure out how is this situation going to be able to be fixed. And I liked that psychologically horrifying element of it. There's also some situational horror that happens in here, characters that get caught up in something, and as it continues to play out, it's horrifying, but it's not going to be your typical slasher horror. So don't go in there prepared to be seeing, someone like Michael Myers be stalking down the street with his knife and everything. However, there are little slivers of that scary element that's included. It's really hard to say what I'm saying without giving away too much. So I am really censoring myself here, referring back to my notes so that I don't overstep. There are, as I mentioned, a couple of things that I feel like they didn't work quite as well. And let me think how to word this without giving anything away. When the climax of the movie is happening, there is something that occurs that has an effect, but only selectively. And I do not understand why. That is not made clear. Maybe in the comments we can discuss that. Also, this coming Tuesday, I'm going to be on Nadia's channel, Horror with Nads. We're going to be having a full-on discussion about this film. I'm looking forward to that a lot because I want to talk about this with people so much. So there's that. And then another thing, the explanation or the demonstration given for how certain people were misled about what was going on, it felt a little shaky to me. Perhaps a rewatch will smooth over those wrinkles. But for now, those are the two things that stood out to me as possible. I don't know about that. However, these are very minor, especially when compared to a movie like Barbarian, and they did not ruin the experience. So I'm curious to see what you guys pick up about this movie. Any other weaknesses maybe that I didn't spot because I was just having so much fun enjoying this movie much more than I expected to. I'm very happy about that. And I also appreciate how creepy it was on various levels and how smartly written it was. I like that it's slow burn, it's character-driven horror, and I really appreciate that as well. It's, for me, one of the stronger horror films of the year. I like this more than Bring Her Back because I had some issues with Bring Her Back, and that was the sophomore movie of the two brothers that did talk to me. So like Cregger's sophomore movie, as someone described it on a live stream I was on last night, feels like an upward trajectory. The sophomore movie of the brothers that did talk to me feels like a little bit of a downward trajectory because I was not as in love with Bring Her Back as I was Talk to Me. It didn't hold up the way the first movie did. This one, complete opposite experience, and I'm very pleased with that. I look forward to seeing this movie again. I will probably add this movie to my collection. Absolutely. Will not be adding Barbarian to my collection, but I will be adding Weapons, and I would love if there were an audio commentary on the Blu-ray or DVD about this. Absolutely. Would love that. As far as enjoyment factor, another solid horror film this year, Sinners. Sinners and Weapons. They're right on up there. It's probably two of my favorite horror movies of the year. Anyway, I think I've gone through all of my notes without revealing too much of anything, so I guess that's about all I have to say about Weapons. When you guys get around to watching it, or if you've seen it already, drop a comment down below and let me know how it compares to Barbarian for you, whether you felt like I did, that the narrative of the story is solid pretty much throughout, or if you had problems with it, if you felt like it was a bit anticlimactic compared to how much you enjoyed Barbarian. I'm sure there's probably going to be some people who feel that way, but it does seem that for the most part, the reception of this film has been fairly positive. We'll see how everything shakes out after more and more people see it. All right, that's it for this one, you guys. Bye.